Do you remember those shocking 1970s ads, the ones so wild they would never be allowed today? These ads were everywhere back then, shaping what we bought, laughed at, and even believed was normal. Looking back now, how did we not see how outrageous they really were? Beer ads featuring pregnant women might sound like a dark joke today, but in the 1970s it was a real selling point. Some companies ran campaigns for light beer that claimed it was so mild, so harmless, that even expectant mothers could enjoy a glass without worry. You would see smiling women with round bellies raising their bottles in toast, suggesting that drinking was part of a healthy social lifestyle. At the time, the science about alcohol and pregnancy was not as widely known, and advertisers used that gap in awareness to their advantage. They leaned into the idea that a lighter beer meant safer indulgence, turning it into a product for everyone at the table. Neighbors and friends might even have believed the message, treating these ads as reassurance that moderation was perfectly fine. Looking back, it is chilling to realize how casual the tone was, almost as if they were advertising orange juice or iced tea. These ads remind us just how different cultural standards were, and how profit often outweighed responsibility. What was framed as a lifestyle choice then now stands as one of the most shocking missteps in advertising history. Cigarette billboards near schools were once an everyday sight, and few thought twice about it. Bright cartoon-style ads loomed over sidewalks where children walked daily, making smoking look playful and exciting. Companies filled the billboards with friendly mascots, colorful lettering, and smiling faces that seemed closer to comic strips than serious health warnings. Kids waiting for the bus could not miss them, and many grew up associating smoking with fun rather than danger. For advertisers, it was a smart way to plant brand loyalty early, long before the children could even buy their first pack. Parents often complained, but with so few restrictions at the time, tobacco companies had free rein to place ads wherever they pleased. These billboards turned neighborhoods into playgrounds of persuasion, normalizing cigarettes for a whole generation. The fact that they towered so casually near elementary schools is shocking today, but back then it was considered clever marketing. It took years of public outcry and health campaigns before regulations finally banned the practice. Until then, those billboards stood as bright, smiling invitations to a lifelong habit. Cigarette ads on primetime television were once as common as commercials for laundry detergent. Before the bans, some of the biggest stars in entertainment openly endorsed cigarette brands during family shows. Popular actors, athletes, and even talk show hosts lit up on screen, promising smoother flavor or cleaner smoke. The ads were not limited to late-night hours either. They aired during the very programs kids and parents watched together. Entire families might see their favorite celebrity recommend a particular brand, turning it into the cool or trusted choice. The commercials made smoking seem not only safe but glamorous, framing it as a natural part of modern living. What makes it so unsettling now is how openly the ads invaded the spaces where health warnings should have mattered most. Children were exposed to them constantly, and parents received the subliminal message that smoking was an acceptable part of daily life. The shift from prime-time endorsements to outright bans shows just how dramatically cultural understanding changed. But back then, lighting up with your favorite star felt like the most natural thing in the world. Alcohol ads using cartoon characters blurred a dangerous line between fun and adult behavior. In the 1970s, beer and liquor companies experimented with mascots and animation that looked no different from cereal commercials. Smiling animals, dancing bottles, and catchy jingles made the drinks seem playful and inviting. The strategy was deliberate. If kids found the ads entertaining, they would grow into customers who already recognized the brand. Parents might have laughed at the cartoons, never realizing how easily they bridged into children's imaginations. Teenagers were especially vulnerable because the ads seemed youthful and rebellious at the same time. Some even mimicked Saturday morning cartoon styles, slipping right into the same visual language kids trusted. Looking back, it is shocking how openly companies leaned on tactics clearly designed to catch young eyes. These ads showed how little separation there was between child-friendly entertainment and adult marketing. What we now see as exploitation was once just business as usual. Makeup ads promising obedient women are some of the most jaw-dropping relics of the 1970s. Certain campaigns literally tied beauty to submission, suggesting that women who used their products would be more pleasing, more manageable, and more acceptable to men. The ads were dressed up with soft lighting, elegant music, and romantic slogans, but the underlying message was clear. Cosmetics were not about self-expression, they were about control. Models gazed longingly at men who looked on approvingly, as though mascara or lipstick was the secret to a compliant personality. For teenage girls flipping through magazines, these messages set a dangerous standard about what it meant to be attractive. The ads reinforced outdated gender roles under the guise of glamour, selling the idea that beauty meant silence and obedience. In a decade where women were fighting for equality in the workplace and beyond, the contrast is staggering. It shows how deeply advertising clung to old stereotypes, even as society was pushing forward. Today, these ads look more like satire than marketing, but in their time, they were taken seriously. Sugary cereal ads with toy bribes turned breakfast into a marketing battlefield. Every Saturday morning, commercials offered kids not only colorful cereal, but also the promise of a toy tucked inside the box. Marketers aggressively used giveaways, plastic cars, action figures, or stickers to hook children into begging their parents for the brand. The cereal itself was often little more than sugar-coated shapes, but the toy made the purchase irresistible. Kids compared collections at school, swapping duplicates and bragging about rare finds. Parents often gave in, knowing the real prize was not nutrition, but appeasing the excitement of their children. For advertisers, the toys were an easy way to build brand loyalty and guarantee repeat purchases. The strategy worked so well that it became nearly impossible for healthier cereals to compete. Looking back, it is shocking how openly companies marketed sugar under the disguise of fun. The ads sold childhood joy in exchange for long-term habits, and many of those cereals still carry the legacy today. Weight loss ads pushing amphetamines were disturbingly casual in their approach. In glossy magazines and late-night commercials, energy pills were marketed as the perfect way to slim down quickly. The ads promised not only rapid weight loss, but also more energy, more confidence, and even better moods. Teenagers and adults alike saw these products as modern miracles, never realizing the dangers hidden inside. Amphetamines were presented as harmless aids, often alongside smiling women in bikinis or business attire. Doctors were quoted or actors posed as experts, lending the campaigns a false sense of authority. For young women especially, the pressure to stay thin made these ads incredibly powerful. Families flipped through pages that treated dangerous substances like harmless supplements. The shocking part is how normalized it was, as though popping pills was no different from drinking a cup of coffee. These ads highlight just how far companies went to profit off insecurity, no matter the cost. Car ads minimizing safety were another staple of the 1970s, and they glorified speed above all else. Commercials showcased vehicles tearing down highways, drifting around corners, and racing through city streets. Seatbelts and crash risks were never mentioned. Instead, the focus was on horsepower, handling, and a carefree lifestyle. The faster the car, the more desirable it seemed, with young men often portrayed as heroes behind the wheel. Even when laws about seatbelt use began emerging, advertisers downplayed safety features as boring or unnecessary. The thrill of danger was part of the appeal, and the ads leaned into it heavily. For teens watching, it sent a clear message. Driving was about excitement, not responsibility. Parents worried, but companies pushed forward, knowing speed sold better than caution. Looking back, the lack of concern for safety feels reckless, especially compared to modern standards. These commercials remind us how long it took for responsibility to catch up with style. Candy ads promising popularity targeted kids at their most vulnerable. Campaigns suggested that eating a certain chocolate bar or chewing a particular gum would instantly make you more likable. The message was not subtle. Kids without the candy were left out, while the lucky ones were surrounded by friends. Commercials staged playground scenes where sharing sweets magically transformed social status. For children desperate to fit in, The implication was irresistible. Candy was not just a treat, it was the key to belonging. Parents often saw the ads as harmless fun, never realizing how much pressure it put on their kids. The reality was that sugar companies were selling more than sweets. They were selling acceptance. Looking back, it is startling how manipulative the strategy was, dressed up in jingles and smiling faces. Candy may have tasted sweet, but the message left behind was bitter. The promise of instant popularity was a powerful, if damaging, hook. Beer commercials featuring kids or teens are perhaps the most unsettling examples of advertising gone too far. Some spots blurred the line, showing minors in scenes of celebration or casually included in parties where beer flowed freely. The implication was clear: drinking was part of growing up, and everyone, even the young, could join in. Smiling teens clinked glasses, or children appeared in the background of ads that otherwise focused on adult fun. The casual nature of these portrayals made alcohol look normal and harmless for all ages. Critics called them out, but companies defended the ads as playful or symbolic. The truth is, they were planting seeds early, using images of youth to build comfort with their products. Looking back, it is hard to imagine how these spots ever aired without backlash. Today they feel shocking, but in their moment, they were brushed off as clever marketing. It is a chilling reminder of how blurred the lines once were. Toy ads with zero safety disclaimers were everywhere in the 1970s, and the products they pushed now seem almost unreal. Lawn darts with sharp metal tips, BB guns that fired real pellets, and chemistry kits packed with dangerous chemicals were all pitched directly to children. Commercials made these toys look adventurous and exciting, showing kids running through backyards or mixing bubbling concoctions without a hint of warning. One ad even showed kids launching lawn darts high into the air, cheering as they landed in the grass with no adults around. Another proudly boasted about chemistry sets that could make explosions, presenting danger as part of the fun. Parents were left to assume the products were safe simply because they were advertised on television. But the truth was, injuries were common, and stories of accidents spread quickly. Despite this, companies doubled down on the fun, turning hazards into selling points by emphasizing the thrill of real action. The ads glamorized risk, painting it as part of growing up. Kids begged for the toys, never realizing how dangerous they really were. Looking back, it is shocking to see how casually companies marketed what were essentially weapons or dangerous experiments as children's playthings. It took countless accidents and lawsuits before regulations began to rein in the worst offenders. Until then, the ads sold excitement with no mention of the risks waiting on the other side. Diet candy with saccharin was marketed as the perfect way to satisfy cravings while losing weight. Commercials framed the sweets as guilt-free indulgence, showing slim women happily chewing gum or popping candies between meals. The ads promised that saccharin was not only harmless but helpful, allowing you to slim down without giving up sugar. Commercials used smiling models on beaches, suggesting that eating these candies was the secret to a bikini body. Even print ads carried bold promises that you can eat all you want and still look stunning, ignoring the truth. Teen girls especially were targeted, with slogans suggesting beauty and confidence could come from swapping real candy for diet versions. The campaigns ignored early concerns about saccharin's safety, brushing aside studies that hinted at risks. For families struggling with weight, the message was clear. These candies were the modern solution to an old problem. Parents bought them believing they were doing something healthier, while kids enjoyed the taste without questioning the science. Years later, health scares about saccharin's link to cancer would change the conversation completely. But in the 1970s, the ads were casual, cheery, and reassuring. Looking back, it is unsettling how easily people were convinced that chemicals could replace sugar without consequence. Soda ads using medical claims pushed products as if they were part of a healthy lifestyle. Commercials suggested that cola provided energy, revived your mood, or even helped with digestion. The campaigns blurred the line between refreshment and medicine, presenting sugary drinks as if they carried real health benefits. Some ads even implied soda could settle stomach aches or replace vitamins, treating carbonation as medicine. Others promised a pick-me-up effect, packaging sugar as a miracle cure for low energy. Doctors in white coats or actors posing as experts often appeared to back up the claims. Families sitting around the dinner table were shown enjoying soda like it was a cure-all, not a sugary indulgence. For teens, the message was even more appealing. Drinking soda made you sharper, cooler, and more energetic. Parents, bombarded by the constant messaging, often believed it. The ads reinforced the idea that soda was more than just a treat. It was essential. Today, we know the damage caused by excess sugar, but at the time, the health warnings were drowned out by jingles and smiling faces. Looking back, the claims feel absurd, but in the 1970s, they were convincing enough to make soda a household staple. Fast food ads pushing supersized portions planted the seeds of a culture where bigger is better became the norm. Commercials bragged about massive burgers, heaping fries, and shakes so large they could replace entire meals. Families were shown celebrating oversized servings as if they were a treat worth bragging about. Ads often showed kids trying to hold burgers wider than their hands, laughing at the absurd size. Drinks were poured into comically tall cups with slogans promising double the fun in every gulp. The messaging was simple. More food meant more value, and more value meant happiness. For teens especially, the ads turned eating large portions into a symbol of fun and freedom. The bigger the meal, the bigger the statement you were making with your friends. Parents were encouraged to indulge too, reassured that bigger servings were not only affordable but festive. The ads rarely mentioned nutrition or health, focusing instead on smiles, laughter, and stacks of food that seemed endless. Looking back, these campaigns helped set the stage for decades of overeating and health struggles. What felt like harmless fun in the 1970s now looks like the beginning of a nationwide problem. Ads using offensive stereotypes were still shockingly common in the 1970s, and many of them aired on mainstream television. Commercials leaned on caricatures of race, ethnicity, and gender, often turning cultures into punchlines. Products were pitched with exaggerated accents, cartoonish costumes, or harmful tropes that reduced entire communities to jokes. Some food ads showed exotic chefs portrayed with mocking voices, while cleaning products used caricatures of women of color as servants. Beer commercials even leaned on stereotypes of Irish drinkers or Italian loudmouths, playing prejudice for laughs. At the time, audiences often laughed along, never questioning the damage such portrayals caused. For children, these images reinforced distorted views of the world around them. Companies knew the tactics were lazy, but they worked because they stuck in viewers' minds. Whether it was food, household goods, or entertainment, the stereotypes were packaged as humor and familiarity. Today, these ads are painful to watch, but in their era, they passed as acceptable marketing. They remind us how deeply ingrained prejudice was in everyday media. What is now considered offensive and unacceptable was once broadcast as entertainment. Fast food ads with all-you-can-eat claims turned dining into a binge-style challenge. Commercials boasted about endless fries, bottomless drinks, or buffet tables stacked with food. Families were invited to indulge without limits, as if overeating was not only allowed but celebrated. The ads often showed long buffet tables with kids running back and forth, plates stacked higher than their heads, laughing like it was a carnival. The entire atmosphere was staged to make excess look joyful, like a family game rather than a health concern. For restaurants, it was not just about food. It was about creating a spectacle that people would come back for again and again. For teens, the promise of unlimited food felt like a dream come true. Friends could gather, pile plates high, and compete to see who could eat the most. Restaurants leaned into the spectacle, showing kids laughing with trays full of food. The message was clear. More food meant more fun, and more fun meant loyalty to the brand. Parents were encouraged too, told that it was an affordable way to treat the family. Nutrition was nowhere in sight. What mattered was abundance. Looking back, these ads seem irresponsible, glorifying excess while ignoring the health costs. They played into the idea that restraint was boring and indulgence was the true path to happiness. Ads glamorizing tanning oils made sun damage look like a badge of honor. Commercials showed teens and young adults rubbing on baby oil or special sun enhancers before lying out for hours. The darker the tan, the more attractive and healthy you were supposed to look. Many ads even compared tanning to fitness, framing bronzed skin as proof of an active lifestyle. Models stretched on beaches with reflective blankets to maximize the sun, and the oils themselves were packaged like luxury perfumes. The idea sold was simple. The deeper the tan, the more beautiful and admired you would be. Companies promised quicker, deeper tans without mentioning the risks of burns, skin damage, or long-term health effects. The ads made lying in the sun seem glamorous, like a rite of passage. For young women especially, the promise of a golden glow was irresistible. Parents rarely questioned it, since tanning was framed as harmless self-care. The truth, of course, was much more dangerous, but the marketing was powerful enough to silence doubt. Looking back, it is shocking how casually companies encouraged risky behavior in the name of beauty. Tanning oils were sold like miracle products, and the consequences were hidden behind glowing smiles. Sugary gum commercials in schools made it seem like chewing gum in class was not only acceptable, but encouraged. Ads showed kids chewing happily at their desks, blowing bubbles, and even sharing sticks of gum with teachers nearby. The message was clear: gum was part of everyday school life, not a distraction. One commercial even portrayed gum as a study aid, with students suddenly more focused and energetic after chewing. The visuals made classrooms look like playgrounds, with kids drumming on desks and smiling at teachers who just nodded approvingly. It was pure fantasy, but for children watching, it felt like permission to break the rules. For children, this was validation. They could imagine chewing in class without punishment. The commercials used bright colors, catchy jingles, and cheerful voices to make gum feel fun and educational. Parents saw the ads and assumed gum was harmless, even a positive treat. Teachers, of course, knew better, but the cultural pressure was strong. The result was classrooms filled with sticky desks and rebellious kids who wanted to copy what they saw on television. Looking back, it is shocking how casually gum companies turned schools into stages for their products. They marketed sugar and distraction as if it were a healthy part of childhood learning. Car ads without seatbelts presented families in ways that seem reckless today. Commercials showed kids bouncing freely in the back seat, smiling as cars sped down highways. Parents laughed in the front while children leaned out of windows, waving happily. The absence of seatbelts was never questioned, as if safety did not matter. Some ads even portrayed seatbelts as optional or uncool, suggesting that freedom meant riding without restraints. Families were filmed on road trips with picnic baskets and pets roaming the car like it was a living room on wheels. The subtext was clear: fun and freedom came first, safety could wait. Instead, the focus was on the joy of travel, freedom, and carefree family life. The message was that cars were about fun, not responsibility. For kids watching, it looked like a dream adventure. For parents, it reinforced the idea that restraints were unnecessary for short trips. Looking back, it is hard to believe these ads ever aired, considering what we know now about accidents and injuries. The commercials remind us how safety once took a back seat to style. They show how far we have come in recognizing the true value of protecting lives. Alcohol ads linked to sports were a staple of the 1970s, and they targeted audiences of all ages. Beer and liquor brands tied themselves directly to youth-favorite events, from football games to baseball broadcasts. Commercials showed fans cheering with drinks in hand, as if alcohol was part of the sport itself. One campaign even staged locker room celebrations with athletes spraying beer like champagne, sending the message that victory was incomplete without alcohol. The ads blurred patriotism with drinking, showing fans draped in flags holding mugs in stadiums. To young viewers, the connection between sports heroes and alcohol made drinking look like an achievement in itself. Teenagers watching these events saw the connection too, learning that celebration and beer went hand in hand. Stadiums carried banners, and television spots ran alongside game coverage, making alcohol inseparable from athletic culture. Parents and children alike absorbed the message that sports and drinking were a natural pair. It blurred the line between wholesome family entertainment and adult indulgence. Today, the practice feels unsettling, but back then it was simply effective marketing. It made alcohol feel patriotic, celebratory, and essential to the fan experience. Looking back, it is clear how easily the ads normalized drinking for generations of young viewers. Kids' snack ads using clowns and mascots were some of the boldest attempts to bypass parents and go straight to children's imaginations. Brightly painted clowns, talking animals, and magical characters danced across television screens, pitching everything from chips to sugary fruit snacks. The commercials rarely mentioned nutrition because the entire focus was on fun. Children were shown laughing, playing, and begging their parents to buy the latest snack as if the mascot itself had whispered the idea into their ears. Parents often rolled their eyes at the gimmicks, but for kids, the mascots became larger-than-life heroes. The ads were designed to make the snack feel like a ticket to belonging. If you ate what the clown or cartoon character ate, you were part of the fun. Many of these mascots appeared in schools, toy stores, and even fast food chains, reinforcing the message over and over again. Looking back, it is shocking how directly marketers targeted children, using characters that blurred the line between entertainment and advertising. These mascots were not just selling food, they were selling loyalty, creating lifelong customers before children were old enough to realize they were being marketed to. Today, the clowns and characters may feel nostalgic, but in their time, they were part of one of the most powerful and troubling advertising strategies ever aimed at kids. Household cleaner ads with no warnings now feel surreal, but in the 1970s, they were completely normal. Commercials showed kids playing in spotless kitchens or families enjoying dinner, while bottles of bleach, ammonia, or sprays sat casually on the counter. There were no child safety caps, no bold labels, and no disclaimers reminding parents to keep products away from children. Instead, the ads focused entirely on how well the product worked, how quickly it cleaned a mess, or how sparkling it left a surface. Some even showed kids handling sponges or pretending to help, blurring the line between safe chores and toxic exposure. Parents watching these ads were encouraged to see cleaners as harmless household tools, not hazardous chemicals. The reality, of course, was far more dangerous, and countless accidents from poisonings and spills occurred during this era. Looking back, the absence of warnings feels reckless, almost unthinkable. Today's brightly colored hazard symbols and child-proof packaging are a stark contrast to the carefree way cleaners were marketed in the 1970s. The ads sold peace of mind while ignoring the risks sitting right under the kitchen sink. Sugary breakfast bar ads as health food are some of the most manipulative examples of marketing from the 1970s. Companies took what were essentially candy bars, loaded with sugar, chocolate, and syrups, and repackaged them as nutritious energy for kids. Commercials showed smiling families starting their mornings with these bars, treating them as fuel for school, sports, and long days. The ads often featured athletes or cartoon mascots, suggesting that eating one would make you strong, fast, and full of focus. Parents, overwhelmed by busy schedules, were told the bars were convenient and healthy, perfect for slipping into a lunchbox. In reality, most of them contained little more than sugar and empty calories. The packaging used words like wholesome and energy, hiding the truth under layers of cheerful design. For children, the commercials turned candy into something that looked responsible to eat every day. Looking back, it is unsettling how casually sugar was sold as nutrition and how many families fell for the message. These breakfast bars promised health but delivered little more than a sweet rush to start the day. Men's cologne ads with predatory themes are some of the most shocking relics of 1970s marketing. Commercials often featured men chasing women, cornering them in elevators, or overwhelming them with attention the moment they sprayed on cologne. The message was aggressive and clear. The scent gave men power over women, making them irresistible and entitled. Women in the ads were portrayed as helplessly drawn in, often against their will, as if the cologne stripped them of choice. What seems appalling today was framed then as romantic or playful. Teen boys watching these ads were fed a dangerous lesson. that confidence came not from respect or kindness, but from dominance. The campaigns were bold, unapologetic, and disturbingly popular. Parents may have shrugged them off as harmless exaggerations, but the undertones were unmistakable. Looking back, it is startling how normalized predatory behavior was when wrapped in glossy packaging and music. These ads would never air today, and for good reason. They remind us of how far advertising has come in recognizing the line between attraction and aggression, and how easily it was crossed in the past. Cigarette ads aimed at women in the 1970s leaned heavily into the idea of independence, glamorizing smoking as a symbol of liberation. The most famous campaigns told women, "You've come a long way, baby," suggesting that cigarettes were the reward for equality. Commercials showed stylish women striding confidently through offices, clubs, and city streets, with slim cigarettes acting as the ultimate accessory. The ads tied smoking to empowerment, framing it as a way to break free from traditional roles. For many women, the message was enticing. It promised sophistication, strength, and rebellion in a single gesture. The reality, of course, was addiction and health risks, but the commercials never showed that side. Instead, they wrapped the product in music, fashion, and the language of freedom. Looking back, it is astonishing how effectively tobacco companies co-opted the women's movement to sell cigarettes. These ads did not just sell smoke, they sold a vision of progress, cleverly twisting empowerment into a marketing tool. Today, they stand as one of the most cynical examples of advertising manipulation, using women's rights as a backdrop for profit. Carbon tetrachloride in cleaning products was the silent helper under every kitchen sink. You probably never saw the name on the bottle, but it was in there, doing its job in spot removers, fire extinguishers, and dry cleaning solvents. It evaporated quickly, had no strong smell, and cut through grease like magic. Housewives used it without a second thought, trusting the promises of sparkling countertops and stain-free clothes. It was so common, people kept it in spray bottles, poured it directly on rugs, or wiped it across oven doors. But what no one saw was how it worked its way into lungs and livers. Carbon tetrachloride is now known to cause liver failure, kidney damage, and central nervous system depression. And it's considered a probable human carcinogen. OSHA eventually slammed the brakes, but not before decades of exposure left a long legacy. We trusted the labels, we trusted the results. But even art supplies had their own set of hidden hazards, and the next one made every school art room smell like danger. Moon shoes promised to turn every kid into an astronaut by letting them bounce like they were walking on the moon. In reality, they were plastic platforms with bungee cords stretched across, strapped onto your sneakers with Velcro. You wobbled onto them, took a few awkward hops, and immediately realized you were in trouble. The commercials showed kids bouncing gracefully across lawns. In real life, most kids looked like newborn giraffes trying to stand for the first time. Twisted ankles, scraped knees, and faceplants were practically guaranteed within the first 5 minutes of play. But that did not stop the excitement of trying them out. Kids loved the idea of having their own personal trampolines on their feet, even if it meant constant wipeouts. Parents hated them for both the danger and the noise. Every hop sent a thunderous clunk through the house if you dared use them indoors. Despite the injuries, moon shoes became a must-try fad, a weird combination of futuristic promise and guaranteed pain. They may not have launched anyone into space, but they certainly launched a lot of kids straight into the grass. Teddy Ruxpin was a marvel of 1980s technology, or a nightmare depending on how you felt about toys that talked. This animatronic bear had a built-in cassette player, and when you popped in one of his story tapes, his mouth and eyes moved along with the narration. For kids, it was like watching a stuffed animal come to life, reading you bedtime stories with a friendly, robotic charm. Some kids whispered to him at night, convinced he could actually hear and respond back, while others swore he moved even without a tape inside. Parents, on the other hand, often jumped when they heard Teddy's voice suddenly start up from across the room. The toy had an odd way of blurring the line between comfort and creepiness, which only made him more unforgettable. For adults, the moving plastic mouth was often described as mildly terrifying, especially when the tape jammed and Teddy kept moving his lips without sound. Still, he became a cultural phenomenon. Kids adored him, dragging him everywhere as both toy and storyteller. He even had his own television show, proving just how popular he was. Sure, the mechanism inside was loud, and the magic disappeared a little when you realized it was just a cassette player in a bear suit. But in the moment, Teddy Ruxpin felt like the future of toys, and for many kids, he really was a best friend. If you grew up in the 1970s, the Atari 2600 was more than just a machine. It was a revolution. Released in 1977, it looked like something from a spaceship with its wood grain panel and chunky switches. But once you plugged it in and inserted a cartridge, everything changed. Pong, Missile Command, Space Invaders, these games turned your television into a battlefield, a racetrack, or a galaxy far, far away. It was not just about playing. It was about being inside the game. You became the paddle, the ship, the pixelated hero. The joystick was awkward and stiff, but it gave you power, real power. Before Atari, play was physical, outside with balls, bikes, or board games. After Atari, play became immersive. You could lose hours in those blinking, buzzing worlds. You could lose yourself. Parents worried, teachers warned, but kids knew better. They felt something shifting, a new kind of play, a new kind of escape. Video games were not just mindless distractions. They were portals, and Atari was the key. It changed what it meant to be a kid. It made your house feel infinite, and whether you were dodging aliens or chasing high scores, you were part of the first generation to hold a digital future in your hands. Cabbage Patch Kid frenzy turned toy stores into battlegrounds. These soft-bodied dolls with unique, slightly odd faces were the must-have gift of the 1980s. Each one came with a birth certificate and adoption papers, making it feel like you were bringing home a real baby. But getting your hands on one? That was another story. Parents lined up at dawn. Some camped overnight. Others sprinted through department stores in scenes more suited to action movies than holiday shopping. There were arguments, tears, the occasional tackle, and when someone finally scored a doll, they clutched it like it was made of gold. Kids loved them. They named them, dressed them, and carried them everywhere. Some families had to settle for knockoffs with names like Garden Patch Pals that never quite felt the same. But if you had a real one, you were a legend. Looking back, it seems wild that a doll caused so much chaos. But in that moment, nothing mattered more. Cabbage Patch Kids were not just toys. They were trophies. Proof that your parents had braved the crowds and won. And decades later, those round faces still sit on shelves, quietly remembering the madness they caused. You know the struggle. These were not the soft plastic kind you could twist. These were cold, clanky, and had a metal lever down the center that always seemed to jam. You filled them carefully, making sure not to spill as you walked them to the freezer. And when you wanted ice, you braced yourself. That lever took strength and guts. Pull it too fast, and ice shards sprayed across the kitchen. Pull it too slow, and it did nothing. There was a sweet spot, and only adults seemed to know it. Sometimes the cube stuck anyway. Sometimes the tray froze shut. And yet, there was something satisfying about the ritual. You felt like you were unlocking a frozen treasure. The sound of the lever cracking through the ice was loud, sharp, and kind of thrilling. Ice cubes never tasted better than when they were earned. Those trays lived in every freezer drawer, slowly rusting, denting, but always doing their job. Replaced now by automatic makers and silicone trays, they are largely forgotten. But for anyone who remembers the clang of metal and the cold burn of the handle, they are a badge of domestic toughness. Saturday morning was a sacred ritual. You rolled out of bed in your pajamas, shuffled to the kitchen, and poured your barrel of monkeys was proof that the simplest ideas can last the longest. Released in 1965, the game came in a bright plastic barrel filled with plastic monkeys that linked together by their arms. That was it. No batteries, no board, no setup time. Just spill the monkeys and try to link as many as you could without dropping the chain. It was harder than it looked. The curved arms never seemed to hook just right, and one wrong move could send your whole line tumbling. But when you did it, when you made it past 10 or 15 monkeys, it felt like a small miracle. Kids would challenge each other to beat their records, dump and restart over and over, totally absorbed. The monkeys themselves were colorful, cheerful, and perfectly palm-sized. The game traveled well. It lived in car glove boxes, grandma's house drawers, and birthday party goodie bags. Decades later, the design remains almost unchanged, which says something about how right they got it the first time. Before screens took over fidget time, there was just you, a barrel, and 24 tiny monkeys daring you to beat your best. Formaldehyde in foam insulation and furniture was the invisible guest in every camper van, basement rec room, and mid-century couch. You could smell it in the musty air of grandma's guest bedroom, or the slightly sharp scent inside every mobile home. That chemical wasn't just floating around, it was baked into the foam of seat cushions, the glue holding together your faux wood paneling, and the insulation packed behind the walls. It was cheap, effective, and everywhere. But it also off-gassed like a slow leak, seeping into your lungs while you watched television or napped on a vinyl recliner. Exposure caused watery eyes, skin rashes, sore throats, and, in prolonged cases, respiratory issues and even cancer. The furniture looked modern and sleek, but the air inside many homes became a ticking time bomb. Some people chalked it up to new couch smell and thought nothing of it. But formaldehyde didn't care about aesthetics. The government didn't start cracking down until health complaints poured in from mobile home parks and campers where levels spiked through the roof. And even then, warnings were vague. Back then, though, it was just that smell people got used to. And if your living room wasn't fuming, your scalp might have been, especially if you were chasing those pin-straight 70s hair goals. Slap bracelets looked innocent enough, just colorful fabric bands covered in neon designs, waiting to curl around your wrist. You straightened the metal strip inside, gave it a smack against your arm, and snap! It coiled tightly in place with a satisfying smack. On the playground, it was like a fashion statement and a game rolled into one. Kids collected dozens in wild patterns, zebra stripes, holographic sparkles, cartoon prints, and traded them like baseball cards. But underneath that thin fabric was a sharp metal spring just waiting to cause trouble. As the covers wore down, the metal started poking through, cutting wrists and scratching skin in ways nobody expected from a fun accessory. Teachers quickly banned them from classrooms, partly because of the injuries and partly because kids spent more time slapping bracelets than paying attention. Parents called them dangerous. Kids just called them awesome. The sting of a well-placed slap was part of the appeal. It was jewelry with an attitude. Even though they were pulled off shelves, slap bracelets remain one of the most iconic 1990s fads. Looking back, they were equal parts stylish and hazardous, which pretty much sums up the decade itself. Pogo Ball was one of those toys that looked simple but turned into pure chaos once you tried it. It was basically a rubber ball trapped inside a plastic platform, like a cross between a pogo stick and a spaceship. You stood on the platform, squeezed the ball between your feet, and tried to bounce. The commercials showed kids sailing through the air like it was effortless fun, but in reality, most people ended up wobbling, falling, or scraping their knees on the driveway. The ball gave it just enough instability to make every bounce feel like a gamble. That did not stop kids from trying over and over again. Friends would time each other to see who could last the longest, or who could bounce the highest before toppling over. It was a mix of toy and dare, something you played with knowing full well you might get hurt. For many kids, mastering the Pogo Ball felt like conquering a personal Everest, even if most attempts ended in laughter and a few bruises. HR Pufnstuf was like opening a children's storybook that had somehow exploded onto your television screen. It was colorful, chaotic, and completely unlike anything else on the air. Premiering in 1969 but reigning throughout the early 1970s, it featured a dragon mayor, talking trees, witches, and a boy named Jimmy who got stranded on a magical island. And every episode felt like a fever dream you wanted to revisit. The puppets were huge and bizarre. The sets looked like candy-coated acid trips, and for kids used to more grounded shows, HR Puffin stuff felt like stepping into another dimension. But beneath the strangeness, there was heart. Each episode had lessons about friendship, trust, bravery, but wrapped in surreal layers of fantasy. It was imaginative in the most unfiltered way. It did not ask permission to be weird, it just was. And you either jumped on board or missed out entirely. For kids who felt different, this was a show that said, "Weird is wonderful." It gave permission to dream big, to be strange, to laugh at the absurd. It was chaotic and clumsy, but always sincere. HR Pufnstuf was not just television. It was an invitation to believe in something a little more magical than the world around you. The go-kart track with zero safety rules looked like it was built by someone who once saw a racetrack in a dream and then tried to recreate it with duct tape and a prayer. The sign out front read, "Family Fun." But you knew this was Dad's kind of fun. He paid cash to a man with a sunburn and a clipboard, and before you knew it, you were strapping into a plastic rocket with wheels. No seatbelt, no helmet, just a stern warning. Do not hit your sister. Dad, of course, was already in his own cart, revving the engine like it was the Daytona 500. The track was a cracked loop with grass growing through it and tires stacked too high as a boundary. The exhaust fumes were strong enough to water your eyes, and the cart screeched like a choir of angry lawnmowers. You skidded, bumped, and spun out more than once, but you never forgot the thrill. Especially when Dad passed you on the last lap, one hand on the wheel, the other waving smugly. That victory lap? It lasted all week, and if you were lucky, he would let you stay just a little longer, because the community swap meet down at the church lot was about to open, and Dad never missed that one. Scratch and sniff stickers made notebooks smell like fruit salad, or something pretending to be. Grape, banana, pizza, popcorn, if it existed, there was probably a sticker that gave off a chemical approximation of it. These tiny scented rewards were currency on the playground. You earned them from teachers, you traded them with friends, you collected them in sticker books and flipped through your favorites like a sommelier of glue and artificial scent. Some smelled better than others. Some were so strong they made your eyes water. Others lost their smell after a few scratches but were kept anyway, honored like faded trophies. You knew the popular ones: root beer, bubble gum, and anything with glitter. You also knew the duds, like liverwurst or mystery meat, that somehow ended up in your binder anyway. Scratching a sticker in class was a quiet act of rebellion. You were not supposed to, but you did. And then you passed the notebook around so others could sniff and nod in approval, or gag in horror. Scratch and sniff stickers were low-tech fun with high nostalgic value. They turned paper into treasure. And even today, one whiff of fake strawberry is enough to transport you straight back to third grade with a smile. Yourself a bowl of cereal, always from a brightly colored box featuring a sugar-charged cartoon mascot. But it was not just about what you poured. It was what you poured it into. Saturday morning cereal bowls were branded, oversized, and beloved. They had the logos, the characters, sometimes even games printed inside. Trix, Fruity Pebbles, Super Sugar Crisp, each had its own bowl. You held it like a trophy. You filled it past the brim. The milk turned a strange color. The spoon clinked loudly. And the real show? It was waiting for you in the living room. Schoolhouse Rock, the Super Friends, the Bugs Bunny and Roadrunner Hour. You balanced the bowl on your knees, dripping milk on the carpet, eyes glued to the screen. Parents still asleep, the sun barely up. This was your time. The cereal was sweet, the cartoons were loud, and the bowl made it official. Some were premiums you mailed away for. Others came as prizes. But they all had one thing in common. They turned breakfast into a weekly holiday. That bowl was not just dishware. It was a ticket to your favorite time of the week. Space food sticks were NASA's answer to snacking, and the 1960s answer to cool. Developed with the help of the space agency and manufactured by Pillsbury, these chewy, tube-shaped snacks were inspired by the meals eaten aboard spacecraft during America's race to the moon. They came in flavors like chocolate, peanut butter, and caramel, each one individually wrapped in sleek foil packaging that looked straight out of a science fiction movie. For kids, biting into a space food stick meant pretending you were floating in zero gravity, eating like an astronaut in orbit. They were soft, dense, and slightly grainy. Less candy bar, more futuristic fuel. Parents loved the idea of a high-protein, shelf-stable snack. Kids just liked the novelty. They made it into lunchboxes, road trip bags, and even Halloween candy stashes. Though their popularity waned by the 1980s, the memory stuck, especially for those who watched grainy broadcasts of moonwalks and then unwrapped their own little taste of space. Today, space food sticks are remembered more for what they represented than how they tasted. They were not just snacks. They were a bite of the future, wrapped in foil, waiting in your kitchen drawer. Asbestos ceiling tiles and insulation were practically a design trend in the 1970s. You saw those popcorn ceilings and fuzzy-looking pipe wrappings in homes, schools, offices, everywhere. Nobody warned you not to touch it. Nobody wore masks when cutting into it. In fact, it was marketed as a safety feature, fire-resistant, soundproof, and easy to install. It was the miracle material that builders swore by, and people loved how quiet it made things. Kids sat through classes under ceilings full of it. Parents hung out in basements lined with it. But what no one knew, or chose to ignore, was how the fibers could break loose, float into your lungs, and stay there forever. Asbestos exposure doesn't cause immediate symptoms. It creeps in years later, showing up as mesothelioma or lung disease long after the danger is gone. Once science caught up, the lawsuits started. Suddenly, that fluffy insulation was a lawsuit waiting to happen. Contractors had to wear hazmat suits just to remove it, and homeowners were left wondering how many years they had breathed it in. Today, it's banned in most uses and strictly regulated in others. But back then, it was part of the wallpaper of life. And if the walls and ceilings weren't enough, your first aid kit might have been just as questionable. Sky dancers were supposed to be magical little fairies that soared into the air with a graceful spin. What they actually were was a missile disguised in glittery plastic wings. You pulled the string on the base, the doll launched skyward, and for one glorious second it really did look like something out of a cartoon. Then, reality hit, literally. Sky dancers did not glide gently. They shot off like bottle rockets, smacking into ceilings, televisions, or the nearest unlucky sibling. Parents quickly realized that the graceful flight shown in commercials was more like projectile chaos at home. There were kids who ended up with black eyes, bruises, and even a few stitches thanks to one of these fairy launch attacks. Furniture did not fare much better. Lamps, picture frames, and fragile knickknacks became fair game for airborne collisions. But for kids in the 1990s, the risk was part of the fun. You would laugh hysterically when your friend's sky dancer crashed into their dad's head, then nervously launch your own while ducking for cover. It was one of those toys where the unpredictability was the whole point. Even though recalls eventually grounded them for good, sky dancers live on in memory as the prettiest little hazard a kid could ever own. The Muppet Show was barely controlled chaos, and that was exactly the point. Hosted by the endlessly stressed Kermit the Frog, it brought puppets and celebrities together in a late-night variety show that aired in prime time but captured the hearts of kids everywhere. Launched in 1976, it was not just a puppet show, it was the Puppet Show. Gonzo, Miss Piggy, Fozzie Bear, Animal. These were not background characters, they were stars. The sketches were wacky, the musical numbers were weird. And the jokes? They were sometimes just a little over your head. But you laughed anyway, because the Muppets were alive. They bickered, they loved, they failed spectacularly, and that made them feel human. It was beautiful chaos, held together by heart and felt. For many kids, it was their first taste of satire, of theater, of performance, and it stuck. It felt like a secret shared between generations. Kids laughed at the slapstick, adults smiled at the subtext. The Muppet Show was fun, yes, but it was also oddly emotional. These puppets had dreams. They wanted applause, and watching them chase that week after week made you want to chase your own. Lead-based house paint was on everything, from the trim around your bedroom window to the alphabet blocks you chewed on. It came in brilliant colors: fire engine red, bright yellow, deep green. The more vibrant, the more lead. It was marketed as durable and washable, perfect for messy kids. And boy, did it chip. You'd peel it off windowsills out of boredom or scrape it with your nails without thinking twice. It crumbled into dust that settled into the carpet, got tracked into kitchens, and ended up in the air. Small hands touched it, then mouths. It didn't smell weird. It didn't taste odd. It just quietly poisoned millions of children across the country, lowering IQs and increasing behavioral issues without a single obvious symptom. Entire neighborhoods, especially older ones, were coated in the stuff. Lead paint wasn't banned in residential use until 1978, and even after that, it stayed in homes for decades. Removing it required hazmat suits and special permits. And still, many families had no idea it was even there. It was a silent danger, one that hid in plain sight and looked great doing it. And while the walls might have been risky, the pajamas you wore to bed came with their own fire-breathing surprise. Hot Wheels did not just roll, they roared. When Mattel launched the line in 1968, it changed the way kids thought about toy cars. These were not slow, blocky replicas. Hot Wheels were sleek, bright, and built to race. The original 16 models included muscle cars, hot rods, and custom builds with names like Beatnik Bandit and Diora. They had real speed thanks to low-friction wheels and metal axles. But the real magic came when you laid down that iconic orange track. Loops, curves, jumps. Suddenly, your hallway became Daytona. Kids spent hours building elaborate courses from couches to floorboards to staircases. Some cars went so fast they hit the baseboard and flipped into the next room. The cars were pocket-sized, but they carried the weight of imagination. Each new release felt like a discovery. Paint jobs were wild, details were sharp. Collectors started forming almost immediately. And while other toy cars looked good sitting still, Hot Wheels looked best in motion, blurring by in a flash of chrome and flame decals. For many, it was not just about racing. It was about building your own world, one piece of orange track at a time. Tube socks with stripes were more than just something to keep your feet warm. They were a fashion flag. Knee-high, usually white, with bold bands of red, blue, green, or gold stretched just below the knee, they were worn with pride. In the 1970s, no kid stepped onto the blacktop without a pair. Whether you were heading to gym class, riding your big wheel, or just running wild in the backyard, those stripes meant something. They said you had style. They said you were paying attention. Everyone had them: boys, girls, teens, even cartoon characters on TV. They peeked out from under corduroy shorts and polyester tracksuits, puffed slightly at the top, like tiny banners of youth. They were equal parts sporty and silly. The way they slouched, the way they matched your t-shirt or clashed on purpose, it all became part of your look. And for a generation growing up in a whirlwind of trends and transitions, tube socks were a stable staple. You might have changed haircuts, hobbies, or heroes. But your socks? Those stayed striped. They were cozy, cheap, and iconic. Even today, one glimpse of those stretchy stripes is enough to take you straight back to wood-paneled basements, dodgeball courts, and the pure joy of being a kid with loud socks and no worries. Nickelodeon Gak was slime with attitude. It came in neon colors, stretched like taffy, and made fart noises when you squished it into its plastic tub. Commercials made it look like the ultimate toy. You could stretch it, bounce it, or prank your friends with its gross sound effects. The biggest appeal was the noise. Kids discovered endless ways to make Gak produce disgusting squelches that drove adults crazy. The second appeal was the mess, since it stuck to hair, rugs, and clothes with stubborn determination. If Gak got ground into carpet, you might as well say goodbye to that patch forever. But in practice, it was a disaster. Gak stained clothes, carpets, and furniture permanently, and the chemical smell it gave off was enough to make some parents gag. Kids, of course, thought it was hilarious. The messier it got, the better the toy seemed to be. Gak was Nickelodeon's attempt to bottle their famous green slime, and for a while, It worked brilliantly. But many parents banned it from the house after one too many ruined rugs. Love it or hate it, Gak was a 1990s staple that proved mess and fun often went hand in hand. So before you head out, drop a comment with the wildest ad that shocked you most. Tap like if you learned something new, and subscribe so you never miss another deep dive into the strange side of history.